Hey everyone. I'm Justin. I'm 30 years old now, and at 21, my stepmother accused me of assault to block a $500,000 inheritance my father had set aside for me. He believed her every word. Before I tell you how a single, careless mistake brought their whole world crashing down 7 years later, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories can travel. Alright, let's get into it. The memory is burned into my mind, sharp and cruel like a shard of glass. I was standing in the living room, the one I'd grown up in. The air was thick with the scent of Catherine's expensive perfume, a flowery, suffocating smell that I've hated ever since. She was crumpled on the plush beige sofa, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with perfectly manufactured sobs. My stepbrother, Leo, her golden boy, stood beside her, one hand resting protectively on her back. He shot me a look of pure venom, his eyes narrowed. "You monster," he mouthed silently, the words a poison dart across the room. But it wasn't them I was focused on. My eyes were locked on my father, Richard. He stood by the fireplace, his face a mask of stone. The man who taught me how to ride a bike, who'd held my hand at my grandfather's funeral, was looking at me like I was a complete stranger. A dangerous one. "Dad," I started, my voice cracking. "Dad, I would never." "Don't." He cut me off, his voice dangerously low. It wasn't yelling. It was worse. It was a cold, final judgment. "Don't you dare lie to me. Not after this." "But it is a lie." My voice rose with desperation. "She's lying. Look at me. When have I ever given you a reason not to trust me?" Catherine let out a pained whimper from the couch, a theatrical little sound that made my stomach churn. "Richard, please," she choked out. "Don't make me listen to this. I feel so violated." That was it. That was the kill shot. My father's face hardened, his jaw tightening. He took a step towards me, his eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen before. It was a righteous anger, the kind a man feels when he's protecting his family. The only problem was, in his eyes, I was no longer a part of it. He pointed a trembling finger at the front door. The grandfather clock in the hallway seemed to tick unnaturally loud, counting down the seconds of my old life. "Get out of my house," he said, each word a hammer blow. "Take your things and get out." "Dad, please," I begged, tears now streaming down my own face. "You have to listen to me. This isn't real." He took another step, his face inches from mine. I said, "Get out," he repeated, his voice dropping to a raw whisper. "And don't come back. You are no longer my son." That was the moment my world shattered. The floor fell out from under me. I stumbled back, the shock so profound it felt like a physical blow. I looked from his cold, unforgiving face to Catherine's hidden, probably smiling, face, to Leo's triumphant sneer. I was utterly and completely alone. To understand how a father could so easily discard his own son, how a family could be poisoned so thoroughly from the inside out, we have to go back, way back, to the day Catherine first walked into our lives. My parents' divorce wasn't pretty, but it was clean. They split when I was 9. There was no screaming, no throwing plates, just a heavy, sad silence that settled over our house for months. The arrangement was simple. I lived with my mom, Helen, during the week, and I spent weekends with my dad. For a couple of years, it worked. My dad was my hero. Weekends were our time, fishing trips, ball games, working on his old Mustang in the garage. It was simple and it was good. Then, when I was 11, he met Catherine. The first time I saw her, she was all bright smiles and warm hugs. She had 2 kids of her own, a son named Leo who was a year older than me. He was quiet and watched me with an unnerving intensity, like he was sizing me up. My dad was happier than I'd seen him in years, and because I loved him, I wanted to be happy for him. I really tried. They got married a year later when I was 12. That's when things started to change. The shift wasn't a sudden earthquake. It was a slow, creeping poison. It started subtly. When my dad was in the room, Catherine was the perfect stepmom. "Justin, honey, can I get you anything? Are you getting enough to eat?" But the moment he'd leave to take a call or go to the garage, her face would change. The warm smile would vanish, replaced by a tight, thin line. Her eyes would turn cold. I remember the first time it happened. We were in the kitchen just a few months after the wedding. Dad had just gone outside to mow the lawn. I was getting a glass of water. "You know," she said, her voice a low murmur, completely different from her usual cheerful tone. "I don't really like you." I froze, my hand on the faucet. I was 12. I thought she was joking. I turned and forced a nervous laugh. "What?" She didn't smile. She just leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. "I'm serious. You remind me of your mother. And frankly, I can't stand the sight of her. So for your dad's sake, we're going to pretend to get along. When he's around, we're family. When he's not, you stay out of my way. Got it?" The coldness in her voice was terrifying. It wasn't angry. It was a simple statement of fact. I just nodded, unable to speak. Of course, I told my mom. The next time she dropped me off, I broke down in the car and told her everything. My mom, Helen, is a fighter. She immediately called my dad. I could hear his side of the conversation through the phone. "Helen, come on. You're overreacting. She's been nothing but wonderful to him. Justin is just having a hard time adjusting." He didn't believe me. He didn't even consider it. When I walked into the house that weekend, Catherine was waiting for me. She pulled me into the laundry room, her fingers digging into my arm. Her smile was gone. "I see you're a tattletale," she hissed, her face close to mine. "Let me make something crystal clear to you. If you ever tell your mother anything about me again, I will ensure you no longer have a dad in your life. Do you understand me?" My heart was pounding. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, her grip tightening, "I will divorce your father. I'll hire the best lawyer, and I'll take every penny he has. I will leave him with nothing, a broken, destitute man, and it will be your fault. Your choice, a happy father or no father at all. So you will keep your mouth shut." I believed her, every word. The threat was so absolute, so devastating, that it silenced me completely. From that day on, I learned to live two lives. One where I was part of a happy, blended family for my dad's benefit, and another where I was an unwelcome ghost in my own father's home. The silence was the price I paid to keep him. The years that followed were a masterclass in psychological abuse. Catherine was brilliant at it. Her cruelty was always veiled, always deniable. It was death by 1,000 cuts, each one too small for my dad to ever notice. Food became her favorite weapon. I was a growing teenager, always hungry. When my dad was home, she'd pile my plate high. "A growing boy needs his fuel," she'd say with a dazzling smile. But on the nights Dad worked late or was out with friends, things were different. I'd come to the dinner table and find a place set for her and Leo, but not for me. "Oh, Justin, I'm so sorry," she'd say, her eyes wide with fake innocence. "I completely forgot you were staying tonight. I only made enough for two." The first time, I thought it was an honest mistake. The fifth time, I knew it was a tactic. Leo would sit there, smirking at me over his plate of lasagna while I was told I could have a bowl of cereal or some leftover soup. I often went to bed with my stomach aching, listening to the sound of their laughter from the living room TV. Then came the comments about my appearance. I was a bit awkward as a teenager, a little overweight, as many kids are. Catherine honed in on it like a predator. She'd never say it in front of my dad, but in passing, in a quiet hallway, she'd look me up and down and say, "That shirt is really not flattering on you. It makes you look puffy." Or, "Are you sure you want to eat that? Think of your chin." Leo, of course, followed her lead. He'd call me porker and lardus under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear. When I tried to tell my dad, he'd sigh and say, "Justin, it's just teasing. Boys do that. You need to develop a thicker skin." He didn't understand that it wasn't just teasing. It was a constant, dripping tap of poison designed to erode my self-worth. It was working. I started hating my weekends at his house. I'd invent stomach aches, claim I had too much homework, anything to avoid going. But my mom, not knowing the full extent of the threats, would encourage me to go. He's your father, Justin. You need to maintain that relationship. So I'd go. I'd put on the happy face. I'd endure the silent barbs, the forgotten dinner plates, the feeling of being an intruder. The worst part was the loneliness. I was in a house full of people, my own father included, and I had never felt more alone. The only place I felt safe was my bedroom. I'd retreat there for hours, reading or listening to music, just trying to make myself as small and invisible as possible. But even that wasn't sacred. Catherine had no respect for my privacy. She'd barge in without knocking, often under the guise of looking for something. I'd come home from a walk to find my drawers slightly ajar. My things shifted. She was searching, though I never knew for what. It was about power. It was about showing me that there was no space in that house, not even my own room, where I was truly safe from her. I was living in enemy territory, and the commander-in-chief was the woman my father loved. I learned to bury the pain, to build walls around myself. I thought if I could just hold on until I was 18, until I went off to college, I'd be free. I was wrong. It was only going to get worse. When I was 14, my dad announced a big family vacation. A 2-week trip to Europe. My first thought was dread. 2 weeks. 14 days trapped with Catherine and Leo with no escape. But my dad was so excited, his eyes shining. It'll be the trip of a lifetime, kiddo. All of us together. How could I say no? The trip was a nightmare disguised as a postcard. In front of my dad, Catherine was the doting stepmom, pointing out landmarks and taking family photos where she'd wrap her arm around me. Her smile as wide and fake as a movie set. But the moment his back was turned, the attacks would resume, now with Leo as her gleeful accomplice. It was the little things. At a gelato shop in Rome, I got 2 scoops. Catherine sighed dramatically and said to Leo, just loud enough for me to hear, I hope he plans on walking all that off. We don't want him splitting his new shorts. Leo snickered. At the beach, they'd make comments about my weight, calling me a beached whale under their breath. I tried to ignore it. I bit my tongue so many times I could taste blood. I was doing it for my dad. I just wanted him to be happy. The breaking point came during our last dinner in Paris. We were at a beautiful, expensive restaurant. I was miserable. I'd spent 2 weeks being their verbal punching bag. Leo was telling a story, and I must have been looking down at my plate, lost in my own thoughts. Justin, sit up straight, Catherine snapped, her voice sharp. You're slouching. It's not a good look. Something inside me just broke. All the years of insults, the hunger, the threats, it all came boiling to the surface. I looked up from my plate, straight at Leo, who was grinning. Well, I said, my voice shaking with repressed anger. At least I don't have a double chin like your son. Then I turned to Catherine. And you should talk. In that dress, you look like a penguin. Silence. A stunned, horrified silence fell over the table. My dad's face went from smiling to thunderous in a split second. Leo's jaw dropped. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, real or fake. I couldn't tell. Justin, my dad roared, his voice echoing in the quiet restaurant. Apologize. Now. No, I said, standing up. I won't. They've been doing this to me for the entire trip. For years. I have no idea what you're talking about, Catherine sobbed, dabbing her eyes with a napkin. We've been nothing but kind to you. That's enough. My dad slammed his hand on the table. You will apologize to your mother and your brother, or you will walk back to the hotel. Right now. I looked at his furious face, and I knew it was hopeless. He didn't see me. He only saw his perfect new family, and me, the angry, disruptive son who was ruining it. I didn't say another word. I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving them there. That night, I called my mom from the hotel room, crying uncontrollably. That was the last straw for her. When we got back to the States, she called my dad, and I heard her side of the conversation. It wasn't a request. It was an ultimatum. Richard, I am telling you right now, she said, her voice like ice. If I ever hear that your wife or her son has made one more comment about my son's weight, his appearance, or anything else, I will not hesitate. I will call Child Protective Services and report her for emotional abuse. Do we have an understanding? That phone call changed everything. The direct verbal abuse stopped. But Catherine was too smart for that. She didn't stop her war against me. She just changed her strategy. From that day forward, she and Leo switched to a new, even more insidious tactic. Complete and total silent treatment. If my dad wasn't in the room, I simply ceased to exist. The years leading up to college were quiet. Eerily so. Catherine kept her promise to my mom, but only in the most literal sense. She never said another insulting word to me. Instead, she perfected the art of making me invisible. If I walked into a room where she and Leo were talking, they would fall silent and stare at me until I left. If I asked a question, she would pretend not to hear me, only to answer Leo a moment later when he asked the exact same thing. She'd plan weekend family outings, movies, dinners, trips to the lake, and forget to tell me until they were walking out the door. "Oh, Justin, we didn't think you'd want to come," she'd say with a shrug, the lie hanging in the air. My dad, ever oblivious, would just say, "Well, why didn't you say you wanted to go, son?" He couldn't see the deliberate, calculated exclusion. He just saw a sullen teenager who never seemed to want to participate in family activities. The worst incident from that time happened when I was 16. I was staying at my dad's for a few days during a school break. He was having some friends over for a barbecue, and on a whim I offered to do all the cooking. I'd gotten into grilling, and I was actually pretty good at it. My dad was thrilled. I spent the whole afternoon prepping. I made burgers from scratch, marinated chicken, made potato salad and coleslaw. That evening, everyone was raving about the food. My dad's friends were clapping me on the back, telling him he had a future chef on his hands. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen in that house. I felt proud. My dad was beaming. Later that evening, I was inside grabbing more drinks from the kitchen when I overheard Catherine talking to one of her friends out on the patio, just outside the open window. "He's insufferable, isn't he?" Catherine's voice was a low, venomous whisper, parading around like he's some big shot. "I honestly cannot wait until he's 18 and I don't have to deal with these mandatory weekend visitations anymore." Her friend, Sarah, murmured something I couldn't hear. Then Catherine laughed, a bitter little sound. "Honestly, I was hoping he'd burn the chicken, just so I could watch Richard's face fall. It would have served the little brat right." I froze, my hand clutching a bottle of soda so tightly I'm surprised it didn't shatter. She was hoping I'd fail. She was actively rooting against me, even when I was doing something for her, for my dad, for their guests. It wasn't just that she didn't like me. She despised me. She wanted me to be a failure because my success, however small, was a threat to her. I quietly backed away from the window, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I went back outside, put a smile on my face, and played the part of the happy son for the rest of the night. But that night I finally understood. There was no truce to be had. There was no peace to be made. This was a war, and she would not stop until she had one. College couldn't come soon enough. It was my only escape route. I just had to survive until then. College was my sanctuary. For 3 years I was free. I was just Justin, not the unwanted stepson. I made friends, I did well in my classes, and I only went home for major holidays, keeping my visits brief and clinical. I built a new life for myself, a life where Catherine and Leo were just background noise. The summer I turned 21, my dad called me. His voice was serious. "Justin, I need you to come home for dinner this weekend. There's something important I need to discuss with the whole family." A feeling of dread washed over me, but I agreed. The word family in his house always came with strings attached. That Saturday, the dinner was tense. Catherine was playing the role of the gracious hostess, but her smiles didn't reach her eyes. Leo was unusually quiet, watching me with that same calculating stare from when we were kids. My dad seemed nervous. After we finished eating, he cleared his throat and folded his hands on the table. "All right," he began. "I asked you all here tonight because I've recently updated my legal documents. My will. I think it's important that everyone knows my wishes, so there are no surprises down the line. My heart started to beat a little faster. This was about the inheritance. He continued, "First, Catherine. As my wife, the house will be left entirely to you, free and clear. It's your home." She reached over and squeezed his hand, a soft, grateful smile on her face. "Leo and Isabella," he said, looking at his stepchildren. "The joint savings account we set up for you will be yours to split evenly. It should be a good start for whatever you choose to do." Then he turned to me. His eyes softened, and for a second, I saw the dad I used to know. "Justin," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I know things haven't always been easy, but you are my son, my only son. That's why I am leaving you my entire retirement account. And the '67 Mustang." The air was sucked out of the room. The Mustang was his prized possession, the car we'd spent countless weekends working on together. It was worth a lot, but its sentimental value was immeasurable. The retirement account, I knew, was substantial. My dad had been a smart investor his whole life. We were talking about a significant amount of money, easily $500,000. I was speechless. A wave of relief and gratitude washed over me. After all these years, this was it. This was the proof. He did still love me. He did see me as his son. But my relief was short-lived. I looked across the table. Catherine's face was a frozen mask of fury. The smile was gone, replaced by a look of utter disbelief and rage. Leo looked like he'd been slapped. "Richard," Catherine said, her voice dangerously calm, "are you serious? The entire retirement fund?" "He's my son, Catherine," my dad said simply. "But he doesn't deserve that," Leo burst out, unable to contain himself. "He's barely ever here. We're the ones who take care of you." "That's enough, Leo," my dad said sternly. But Catherine put a hand on Leo's arm. She looked at my dad, her eyes suddenly glistening with tears. "No, Richard. He's right. It's not about the money. It's about the principle. I think there's something you need to know about Justin. Something I've kept silent about for years, to protect this family." A cold chill ran down my spine. I had no idea what was coming, but I knew with absolute certainty that my life was about to be destroyed. The battle I thought I had survived was just a prelude. The real war was about to begin. A few weeks went by. The dinner was a distant, unsettling memory. I tried to push it out of my mind. Maybe they were just angry. Maybe it would blow over. I was naive. I should have known Catherine wouldn't let it go. She wasn't just angry. She was plotting. The call came on a Tuesday night. It was my dad. His voice was a strangled whisper. "You need to come here. Now." He hung up before I could ask what was wrong. I drove the 40 minutes to his house in a state of rising panic. What could be so bad? When I walked in, I found the scene that I described at the beginning. The scene that would haunt my nightmares for years. Catherine on the couch, sobbing. Leo, the righteous protector. And my dad, his face a thundercloud. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You know what's going on," Leo snarled. Catherine looked up, her face streaked with tears. She flinched when she saw me, pulling her robe tighter around herself. "Richard, I can't," she whimpered. "I can't even look at him." "Catherine," my dad said, his voice unnaturally gentle. "Tell me again. I need to hear it one more time." She took a shaky breath. I was getting ready for bed. I came out of the bathroom, and he was just standing there, in the hallway, staring at me. She choked on a sob. "He's been doing it for months, watching me. I've caught him trying the door to our bedroom, to the bathroom." I was too scared to say anything. I didn't want to cause trouble. My jaw dropped. "What? That's insane. I haven't even been here in weeks." "He tried to force himself on me," she finally wailed, burying her face in her hands. "He said if I was going to stand in the way of his inheritance, he would take what he wanted from me instead." It was so absurd, so monstrously false, that I almost laughed. But when I looked at my dad's face, the laugh died in my throat. He believed her. Every single poisonous word. Dad, no, I pleaded, taking a step towards him. This is a lie. She's making this up because of the will. You know this. So she's lying? He shot back, his eyes blazing. And Leo is lying too? Yes, Leo shouted. He's a creep. I've seen the way he looks at my mom. He's a pervert and a rapist. It was a perfectly orchestrated performance. The grieving victim, the heroic son, and me, the villain. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my Aunt Carol, my dad's sister. Justin, your dad just called me in a panic. What on earth did you do? I'm so disappointed in you. The timing was too perfect. I realized later that Catherine must have called her first, feeding her a version of the story, priming her to reinforce the narrative. It was another chess move, cutting off a potential ally before I could even reach out. They had thought of everything. And that's when my dad delivered the final blow. Get out of my house. You are no longer my son. He had been my hero, my anchor. And in the space of 10 minutes, Catherine had turned him into my judge, jury, and executioner. She hadn't just taken my father from me. She had poisoned his memory of me, turning love into disgust. As I walked out the door into the cold night air, I knew I hadn't just lost a home. I had lost everything. I don't remember much about the drive back to my apartment that night. It's all a blur of tears and rage. I stumbled into my room, fell onto my bed, and just broke. The kind of broken that feels like it can never be put back together. I called my mom, my voice so choked with sobs she could barely understand me. All I could get out was, he kicked me out. He thinks I'm a monster. She was there in an hour. She held me while I fell apart. Her presence a small, solid anchor in the swirling chaos of my despair. The days that followed were the darkest of my life. My phone blew up, first with a call from my dad, which I numbly answered. It was short. He told me he was ashamed to call me his son and that he was having his lawyer remove me from the will immediately. He said if I ever tried to contact him or Catherine again, he would get a restraining order. Then he hung up. Next came the texts from my extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins. They had all heard Catherine's version of the story. I was a disgrace. Predator. My Aunt Carol, the one who had texted me that night, sent the cruelest one. Your grandfather would be rolling in his grave. You've brought such shame to this family. Catherine and Leo didn't stop there. They sent me a barrage of hateful messages, calling me every vile name imaginable, telling me to disappear. It was a coordinated attack designed to utterly annihilate me. I had to change my phone number just to make it stop. I dropped out of my classes for the semester. I couldn't focus, couldn't eat. I barely slept. I just lay in my room, staring at the ceiling, the scene in the living room playing over and over in my head. My dad's face, full of disgust. Catherine's fake tears. Depression hit me like a freight train. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. There were days I couldn't get out of bed. There were moments, dark and terrifying moments, where I thought about ending it all. The pain of being so completely rejected by my own father felt unsurvivable. If the man who was supposed to love me unconditionally could believe I was capable of something so vile, then what was the point? My mom saved me. She refused to leave my side. She moved into my tiny apartment for a few months, sleeping on the couch. She didn't push me to talk. She just made sure I ate. She'd sit with me in the silence, a constant, unwavering presence that told me, without words, that I was not the monster they said I was. She was my lifeline. She was the only reason I survived. Slowly, very slowly, the darkness began to recede. It wasn't a sudden sunrise, more like a gradual dawn. My mom's steady presence helped me find my footing. After a few months, I started to feel like a person again. I re-enrolled in my classes. I started going to the gym. I was rebuilding my life piece by painful piece. But I was scarred. I had serious trust issues. I kept everyone at a distance. The betrayal had left a deep wound, and I was terrified of letting anyone get close enough to hurt me like that again. For a couple of years, my life was my mom and my studies. That was it. Then I met Chloe. It was completely random. I was in a coffee shop off campus, cramming for a final. I reached for the last available power outlet at the same time she did. We both looked up, and she gave me this incredible warm smile. "You can have it," she said. "My laptop has more battery life than a nuclear submarine." I found myself smiling back, a real smile, for what felt like the first time in years. We started talking. It was easy, natural. We talked for over an hour, completely forgetting about our exams. She was studying to be a teacher. She was funny and smart, and she had a kindness in her eyes that felt safe. We started dating. I was cautious at first, guarded. I didn't tell her the whole story about my dad. I just said we were estranged. She didn't push. She let me open up on my own terms. With Chloe, I learned what a healthy relationship felt like. She was my biggest cheerleader. She celebrated my successes and supported me through my struggles. She and my mom became my pillars. They were my family. One evening, about a year into our relationship, we were talking about our childhoods. I finally told her everything, the whole ugly story, from Catherine's threats when I was a kid to the final, devastating accusation. I laid it all bare, expecting her to recoil, to see the monster my father saw. Instead, she just took my hand. Her eyes filled with tears, but not of suspicion, of empathy. "Justin," she whispered, "that's horrific. I am so sorry you went through that alone." In that moment, I felt a profound sense of release. Someone outside of my mom heard the worst thing that had ever happened to me and didn't run. She believed me, unconditionally. It was a powerful, healing moment. I was building a future, a good one, with a woman I loved and a mother who was my rock. The past was still there, a shadow in the corner of my life, but it no longer had the power to consume me. I had moved on, or so I thought. I had no idea that the past was about to come roaring back, 7 years after it had tried to destroy me. 7 years. 7 years of silence. In that time, I had graduated from college, landed a good job in marketing, and moved in with Chloe. We were building a life together. My dad, Catherine, and Leo were like characters from a book I'd read a long time ago. The pain had faded to a dull ache, a scar that I had learned to live with. I hadn't spoken a single word to anyone from that side of the family. Then, one Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello." There was a pause on the other end, then a sound that sent a jolt of electricity through my body. A man, sobbing. A ragged, broken sound. "Justin?" The voice choked out. "Is that you?" My blood ran cold. I knew that voice. I would have known it anywhere. It was him. It was my father. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. My throat was tight, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Justin, please," he wept. "Please don't hang up. I was so wrong. God, I was so wrong. What do you want?" I finally managed to say, my voice flat and emotionless. I know you have no reason to listen to me," he stammered between sobs. "But you have to. I found out everything." I still said nothing. I just stood there in my kitchen, the afternoon sun streaming through the window, listening to the sound of my father's world collapsing 7 years too late. "It's Catherine," he said, his voice cracking. For years, she's been having an affair." I felt a strange, hollow sensation in my chest. Not surprise, not even anger, just a weary emptiness. "She was cheating on me," he continued, his voice rising in anguish. "With Mark, my best friend, Justin, my best friend, for over a decade, since before you even went to college. Mark had been like an uncle to me. He was at every family barbecue, every holiday. The betrayal was so deep, so layered, it was almost poetic." "I found a text message on her iPad," my dad explained, the words tumbling out in a rush. "A stupid mistake. She forgot to delete it." I confronted her. She denied it at first, but I had the proof. She finally admitted it. She admitted everything. He took a ragged breath. "And then I asked her. I asked her about you, why she would do that to me, and she just snapped." He paused, and I could hear him struggling to get the words out. She said she was furious about the will. She hated you, Justin. She hated you because you were my son. She admitted she made the whole thing up. The whole story. She laughed about it. She said you were so easy to get rid of. She was proud of it. The silence stretched on. I could hear the hum of my refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic. He had finally learned the truth. The one thing I had prayed for, screamed for, cried for 7 years ago. And now that it was here, I felt nothing. Just a vast, cold emptiness. Justin? Are you there? He pleaded. I'm here, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I am so sorry, he cried, the words tearing out of him. I abandoned you. I threw my own son away for a lie. For her. Can you ever forgive me? Please. I need you to forgive me. Forgive him. The words echoed in the hollow space inside me. He wanted forgiveness. After 7 years of silence, after believing I was a monster, after leaving me to drown, he wanted absolution. Because now his world was in pain. No, I said, the word clear and steady. I can't. And I hung up the phone. He didn't give up. He called again. He texted. He left long, rambling, tearful voicemails. He said he had already started the divorce proceedings. He said he wanted to make things right. He arranged a meeting, a final confrontation. He said he needed me there. He said Catherine and Leo would be there, at his lawyer's office. He wanted them to face me. I didn't want to go. Chloe and my mom both said I didn't owe him a thing. But a small part of me, the part that was still that 21-year-old kid bleeding on the floor of that living room, needed to see it. I needed to see the curtain fall on their pathetic little play. So I agreed to go. The lawyer's office was cold and impersonal. All dark wood and leather. My dad, Richard, looked 10 years older. His face was gray, his eyes hollowed out. Catherine and Leo were sitting on the opposite side of a large mahogany table. Catherine's face was a mask of sullen fury. Leo wouldn't look at me. He just stared at the table, his jaw clenched. The lawyer, a sharp-looking man in his 60s named Mr. Harrison, cleared his throat. I remembered him from my childhood. He was an old friend of my dad's, a man known for his integrity. My dad started, his voice shaking. He laid out the facts of Catherine's affair with Mark, his supposed best friend. He had phone records, text messages, credit card receipts for hotels. The evidence was overwhelming and sordid. Catherine didn't deny it. She just sat there, her arms crossed, radiating contempt. And because of this betrayal, my dad said, his voice cracking, I had to ask myself what else was a lie. He turned his red-rimmed eyes to Catherine. Tell him, he demanded. Tell Justin the truth. About that night. Catherine let out a sharp, mocking laugh. The truth? You want the truth, Richard? The truth is you were a fool. An old, blind fool. Just tell him, my dad repeated, his voice pleading. She finally looked at me. Her eyes filled with a pure, undiluted hatred that was almost breathtaking. All right, fine. You want a confession? Here it is. She leaned forward, her voice a venomous hiss that filled the silent room. Yes, I made it up, every last word of it. You think I was going to stand by and watch you hand over $500,000 of my money, my future, to that little brat? He was a constant reminder of your failed first marriage, a ghost at my dinner table. I wanted him gone, and I got what I wanted. She smirked, a truly ugly expression. And it was so easy. All I had to do was cry a few tears, and your father, the great protector, was ready to throw his own son to the wolves. It was pathetic, really. The room was dead silent. Mr. Harrison, the lawyer, just slowly shook his head, looking at her with utter disgust. My dad made a choked, strangled sound, like he'd been physically struck. Leo sank lower in his chair, his face pale. And me? I just watched. I felt a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching the finale of a movie. The villain was delivering her monologue. She was admitting everything, not with shame, but with pride. She was so consumed by her own greed and hatred that she couldn't even see how monstrous she appeared. Mr. Harrison spoke, his voice cutting through the tension. For the record, he said, looking at some papers in front of him, I should note that 2 months after Mr. Williams was disinherited, I received a call from you, Catherine, inquiring about the legal process for having your husband declared mentally incompetent, which would have given you power of attorney over his estate. I, of course, advised him of this inquiry at the time. Catherine's face went white. My dad stared at her, his expression turning from heartbreak to horror. She hadn't just wanted me gone. She had been coming for him, too. She had finally overplayed her hand. The truth, in all its ugly glory, was out. And I hadn't had to say a single word. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. The moment the lies finally collapsed under their own weight. Thank you for staying with me, for listening to this. You guys are amazing. If you could, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you made it here with me. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is seriously the biggest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The divorce was finalized in record time. My dad had a prenuptial agreement with Catherine that included a strict infidelity clause. It meant that because she was the one who had cheated, she was entitled to absolutely nothing. No house, no alimony, no portion of his retirement fund. She walked away with only what she had brought into the marriage. After years of plotting and scheming to get her hands on my dad's money, she left with nothing. Leo and his sister Isabella were cut off, too. My dad had been paying for Leo's apartment and giving him a generous allowance. That stopped overnight. The life of leisure they had grown accustomed to evaporated. Last I heard, Catherine had to move in with her sister in another state, and Leo was working a minimum wage job, complaining to anyone who would listen about how unfair life was. There was a certain grim satisfaction in that. A few weeks after the meeting at the lawyer's office, my mom got a visitor. It was Mrs. Gable, our old neighbor from when I was growing up, the one who lived next door to my dad. She was a sweet, timid woman who had always been kind to me. She showed up at my mom's doorstep with a plate of cookies and tears in her eyes. She told my mom that she had heard the news about the divorce and she had to confess something that had been weighing on her conscience for years. She said that on countless occasions, when my dad wasn't home, she had been in her garden and had overheard Catherine screaming at me through the open windows of our house. She'd heard the insults, the vicious names Catherine called me. She knew how I was being treated. I never said anything, Mrs. Gable wept to my mom. I was scared. She was an intimidating woman, and Richard seemed so happy. I didn't want to get involved to cause trouble for the boy. Her confession was another piece of the puzzle, another confirmation of the hell I had lived through. It didn't make me angry at her. I understood her fear, but it was a sad reminder of how easily good people can be silenced, allowing evil to flourish in the quiet spaces. My mom thanked her and told her that her validation, even all these years later, meant something. It showed that the abuse hadn't just been in my head. It was real. Someone else had seen it. A week later, my dad asked to meet me for coffee. Just the two of us. I agreed, mostly out of a morbid curiosity. We sat at a small table in a quiet cafe. He looked exhausted, a shell of the man he once was. He pushed an envelope across the table towards me. "This is from my lawyer," he said, his voice hoarse. "Everything has been put back in your name. The retirement account, the title for the Mustang. All of it is yours, Justin, as it always should have been." I looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. "Thank you," I said quietly. He looked up, a desperate hope in his eyes. "Justin, I know I don't deserve it. I know sorry isn't enough. It will never be enough. But I am begging you. Can we try to start over? Can you let me be your father again?" I looked at him, really looked at him. I didn't see the monster who had thrown me out. I just saw a sad, broken old man who had made a terrible mistake. And I felt a flicker of pity. But pity isn't a foundation to rebuild a family on. "You want to know what the worst part was?" I asked, my voice steady. "It wasn't the lie. It wasn't losing the inheritance. It was how quickly you believed it. There was no hesitation, no doubt. You threw away 21 years of being my father in less than 10 minutes. You looked at your own son and saw a monster. Tears welled in his eyes, and he looked down at his hands. I needed a dad that night, I continued. I needed a father to stand up and say, "No, I know my son. He would never do this. But you weren't there. That person was gone. And I can't get him back." I finally picked up the envelope. "I appreciate this. I do. But this," I said, holding it up, "is just money. Can't buy back the 7 years you stole from me. I can't erase what you did." I stood up from the table. "I hope you find peace. I really do. But my life is good now. I have a family that trusts me. That's something you can't give me." "Justin, wait," he pleaded. "Goodbye, Richard," I said, using his first name for the first time. Felt right. He hadn't been dad to me for a very long time. As I walked out of the cafe, I didn't feel angry or triumphant. I just felt free. The final chain that had tied me to that painful past had just been broken. I was finally, completely moving on. The next year was a whirlwind of positive change. It was like a dam had broken, and all the good things that had been held back were finally allowed to flow into my life. The first thing I did was use a portion of the inheritance money to quit my marketing job and start my own business, a small woodworking shop. It had always been a passion of mine, something I'd learned in the garage with my dad in the good years before Catherine. It felt like I was reclaiming a part of my past and turning it into a future. The business took off faster than I could have imagined. People loved the custom furniture I made. It felt incredible to build something real and lasting with my own hands. But the best part of that year was Chloe. She was my rock through everything. She celebrated every small victory with my business and held my hand on the days when the memories got to be too much. About 6 months after my final meeting with Richard, I took her to the coast, to the same spot where we'd had one of our first dates. I was a nervous wreck. My hands were sweating. My heart was hammering in my chest. We were walking along the beach as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I stopped and took her hands in mine. "Chloe," I started, my voice shaky. "You came into my life when it was dark and you filled it with light. You taught me how to trust again, how to love again. You never once doubted me. You and my mom. You are my family. You're my home." I got down on one knee, pulled out the ring I had been hiding in my pocket for weeks, and asked her to marry me. She said yes, of course, through happy tears. Putting that ring on her finger felt like the most right and true thing I had ever done in my life. But I knew that building a new life wasn't just about the good things. It was also about healing the old wounds. The money and the vindication were one thing, but the emotional scars were still there. They were faded, but they hadn't vanished. I was still prone to moments of anxiety, still had a deep-seated fear of abandonment. With Chloe's encouragement, I started seeing a therapist, a man named Dr. Evans. It was one of the best decisions I ever made. Talking to him, unpacking all those years of abuse and neglect in a safe space, was transformative. He gave me tools to deal with the trauma, to understand that Richard's weakness and Catherine's cruelty were about them, not about me. It wasn't my fault. Hearing that from a professional and objective third party was incredibly powerful. I was finally healing, not just on the surface but deep down, in the places that had been broken for so long. I was building a future with a woman I adored, in a career I loved, and I was finally becoming the man I was always meant to be. About a year after I got engaged to Chloe, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. It was addressed to me, in Richard's familiar handwriting. My first instinct was to throw it away. I had made my peace with the situation, and I didn't want to reopen old wounds. But Chloe, with her infinite wisdom, gently suggested I read it. "Maybe it's not for him," she said. "Maybe it's for you, to close the final chapter." So that evening, I sat down with a cup of coffee and opened it. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness. It wasn't an excuse. It was just a long, rambling 8-page letter of confession. He wrote about his own guilt, his willful blindness. He admitted that he had ignored the red flags for years because he was so desperate not to have a second failed marriage. He had prioritized his own comfort over his son's well-being, and it was a failure that would haunt him for the rest of his life. But then there was a section near the end that made me sit up straight. It was the final, ugly twist in the story, one I had never seen coming. He wrote that a few months ago, he had run into one of Leo's old high school friends. They had gotten to talking, and the friend, after a few drinks, had let something slip. He told Richard that everyone in their friend group knew that Catherine was cheating on him. For years. And the person who knew first, who had known all along, was Leo. Leo had apparently found out about his mom's affair with Mark when he was still in high school. But instead of being horrified, he had seen it as an opportunity. He used the information as leverage. It was his ultimate trump card to ensure his mother always gave him what he wanted: money, a car, freedom from any rules. He had been blackmailing his own mother for years. The accusation against me, Richard wrote, hadn't just been Catherine's idea. It was a joint venture. Leo had helped her plan it, helped her execute it. He saw my inheritance not just as money I didn't deserve, but as money that was being diverted from him and his mother, the two people who were bleeding Richard dry from the inside. Reading those words, a final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. It wasn't just a story of a wicked stepmother. It was a story of a deeply dysfunctional, parasitic family unit. Leo wasn't just a spoiled brat who followed his mother's lead. He was a willing, active participant. A cold, calculating manipulator in his own right. The letter ended with Richard saying he was selling the house and moving away. He wasn't asking for a response. He just said he thought I deserved to know the complete and total truth. I folded the letter and put it down on the table. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt a profound sense of finality. Chloe was right. This was the final chapter. The story of Richard, Catherine, and Leo was finally over. They were just sad, broken people, trapped in a web of their own lies. And I was free. A few months ago, Chloe and I were walking on the beach at sunset. It was a cool evening, and she leaned her head on my shoulder as we watched the waves roll in. My hand rested on her belly, where our daughter, our first child, was growing inside her. We had just come from my mom's house, where we'd had dinner. The three of us. The sound of their laughter as they debated baby names was still ringing in my ears. It was a warm, happy sound. As the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, I thought about the long, winding road that had led me to this moment. I thought about the pain, the betrayal, and the loneliness. For so many years, I was obsessed with the family I had lost. The father who had abandoned me. The life that had been stolen. But standing there, with my amazing wife beside me and our future on the way, I realized I had been looking at it all wrong. Family isn't just about blood. It isn't an obligation you're born into. Real family, true family, is about choice. It's about the people who choose to show up. The people who choose to believe in you when no one else will. The people who choose to lift you up when you fall. My mom, who never for a second doubted my innocence, who became my lifeline in the dark. She's my family. Chloe, who looked at my broken pieces and saw something worth loving, who taught me that my scars didn't make me unlovable. She is my family. The life we were building together, the little girl who was about to enter our world. That is my family. Richard wasn't a bad man. He was a weak one. And Catherine and Leo were just empty people, consumed by their own greed. They weren't my problem anymore. They were just ghosts from another life. I pulled Chloe closer, a feeling of deep, profound peace settling over me. The past had made me who I am, but it didn't define me. My future did. And for the first time, looking out at that endless ocean, my future looked brighter than I had ever dared to imagine. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. It's been a long journey, but sharing it helps. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose your own family? Let me know your story in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Take care.